Hello everybody. In an earlier episode of Talking Pictures, we looked at images from illustrated newspapers published in Dunedin, including this one of a gathering of volunteer soldiers that took place in Dunedin in 1877. For today's Talking Pictures, I've been scouring our collections for images of other volunteer encampments. I found quite a few, so let's take a look at some of them. So let's start by refreshing our memories of the story behind the illustrated New Zealand Herald image. In November 1877, around 1,000 volunteer soldiers from around the region assembled at Cargill's monument in central Dunedin, and the men fell in, marched to the beach at Forbury, and staged a mock battle in front of a large crowd of spectators. It was said to be the largest muster of volunteers held in the colony to that date. Now, the 1877 event was held in November, but some of the biggest volunteer gatherings were staged at Easter time. One was held in Queenstown at Easter 1878, and Invercargill hosted one in 1879, then Christchurch in 1880, Oamaru in 1881, before Dunedin took another turn in 1882, although persistent rain forced the cancellation of many of the events that Easter. After another Easter encampment at Invercargill in 1883 and one in Oamaru in 1884, it was back to Dunedin in 1885. The venue was Tahuna Park. Finding enough tents to house the volunteers always seemed to be a problem for the organisers. Although 120 tents capable of housing 800 men were finally found for the 1885 event, the troops arrived out at Tahuna Park to find the tents had all been blown over by strong winds. The Sham Fight in 1885 took place in the morning of the last day of the gathering. A site on the Otago Peninsula above Grant's Braes had been chosen for the fight, because that was beyond the reach of the city's rail and tram networks, and that meant that spectators wouldn't get in the way like they had done on previous occasions when the mock battle had been held down by the beach. It took the soldiers an hour to march up to the site. Once the battle was over, they returned to Tahuna Park, and in the afternoon a public review attracted thousands of onlookers, and that was followed by a band contest in the Garrison Hall in the evening. The review held the following Easter aimed to be the biggest yet, and so it proved to be, with over 2,500 soldiers from Canterbury, Otago and Southland descending upon Oamaru and setting up camp at the town's racecourse. Despite a large consignment of new tents having arrived from London, there were still concerns about whether there was going to be enough of them to house such a big turnout. Each tent housed 8 to 10 men. Although no doubt the officers, who were housed at the top end of the camp, weren't as crammed in as the rank and file. And the leader of the encampment, member of the Legislative Council and commander of the Defence Force, Sir George Stoddart Whitmore, had a tent to himself, with a marquee alongside to serve as a reception room. The highlight of the gathering was undoubtedly the mock naval attack which was staged on the Saturday afternoon. 4 ships with 2 guns each opened the attack, ahead of an attempt to land a flotilla of small boats, including a launch towing a barge laden with troops, onto the Oamaru foreshore. The defending force, which included a battery of 2 large guns and the torpedo boat Taiaroa, managed to repel the attack. The battle ended with the blowing up of a mock enemy command ship, an old surf boat, which threw a large column of water some 250 feet into the air. Individual units held camps of their own. The Hussars' camp included an annual cavalry tournament. Meanwhile, at their annual camp, the Dunedin engineers practiced blowing things up, digging gun pits, putting up telegraph lines, building bridges, and so on. This photo shows the results of one of their bridge-building exercises over the water of Leith. The Easter manoeuvres of 1905 were largely conducted in and around Kaikorai Valley, where a mock battle lasting several days was played out. A deciding moment in that fight came when the attacking forces' advance on the defending forces' position at Mount Grand was stalled by the mock blowing up of a bridge over the Kaikorai stream. When the No. 1 Battalion Otago Volunteers went into camp later in the year, the battalion, led by the Cycle Corps and the Garrison Band, and trailed by the Bearer Corps' ambulance wagon and the baggage guards' wagons, marched from the Garrison Hall out to Tahuna Park. Their first task upon arrival at Tahuna was to pitch the tents and prepare them for inspection. After a parade and church service, the tents were inspected, and the tent led by Corporal Armit of the Highland Rifles was awarded first prize. In January-February 1906, B Battery spent 16 days under canvas at Forbury Park during their annual camp. Firing practice was conducted off Lawyer's Head, aiming at targets on the point at the far end of Smales Beach. At Easter in 1913, over 2,300 men of the Otago Infantry Brigade camped away from the distractions of the city in the Otago backblocks near Middlemarch. By this time, the era of the volunteers was over. The Defence Act of 1909 had replaced volunteers with a new territorial force and introduced compulsory military service. The various scarlet, dark blue and green uniforms that had previously been worn by volunteer units were gone, traded for standardised khaki battle dress. In 2 years' time, the sham fights and training exercises captured in these images would be replaced by real war on an unprecedented scale. See you next time, and thanks for watching.